There were documentaries on PBS. They were excruciating. Occasionally, they were interesting. The Louds had been on. That was interesting because people were talking about sex and stuff. But most documentaries about what's wrong with the CIA, what's wrong with our health care, you know, what's wrong with your heart. They were never people's stories. Very rarely. The Louds was probably the only one. Salesman, the great inspirational film of my life. Grey Gardens. Things the Maisels were doing. But how you would translate that somewhat highbrow, Gimme Shelter, how you would translate that kind of intensity to a pay cable thing was a sort of dilemma. I really didn't know how to figure it out. So I kind of copied the movies. So if a movie was on and it did well, then I would copy that movie in fact. So if it was about divorce, I'd do a documentary about divorce. If it was about swinging, like Bob and Ted and Carol and Alice, I'd do a documentary about swinging. If it was about Jaws, I'd do a documentary about sharks. You know, I didn't have any ideas. I just figured if they're watching those, maybe they'll watch mine. And mine will be the real thing, and theirs will be the story part of it. So I was a copycat. I've always been a copycat, an excellent plagiarist. But I've never been caught because since I have a different genre, I could borrow hot concepts from what people were buying, which we now refer to as the zeitgeist of the moment. But in fact, zeitgeist is simply stealing the aura of popularity. So I tried to be popular by stealing, oh, that's a bad word, by enlarging the concept of what was the zeitgeist of the moment. Yeah, always did it because being a control freaks want to be popular. Otherwise, how do they know if they're in control or not? If you're in control in a room all by yourself, there's not much control. I wanted to be popular. I wanted to be successful at what I did. I wanted to be showy. And I wanted to be noticed. In this fiction environment, I wanted to be noticed for my fact. And my fact was fact programming and also the fact that I was there. And the only way to really be noticed was to copy what was popular or to catch the aroma of what was popular. And that's what I did. I hired people that I had worked for. And this is what happened. I would call people, like I'd worked for, when I had been on the Dream Machine, I had worked for Al Perlmutter, so I'd call Al and I'd say, let's do a show about consumer fraud or something, you know, and let's do a show about cars that are lemons. Because I saw a magazine called Consumer Reports in the lobby of the Time Life building. You know, let's do anti-commercial things. I called Al because I worked for Al. I called Arthur Holtz because I had written some scripts for GI Diary, which was about World War II, to do war shows. I called Gabby Monet. I'd seen a short at Radio City Music Hall that she had done. I called her to do a program on witches, you know, whatever was au courant. And whoever I had worked for, or I'd seen their name roll by on a screen, or I had maybe run into them at the Dream Machine, I would call them and I would get them to work for HBO. And they didn't believe me. Like, you call a guy, you've been earning $150 or $250 a week working for them. You call them up, you say, I want to make a documentary on Winston Churchill. They think you're, calling from Bellevue. But we did it. That's what we did. And they came and they kind of looked at me, and we wrote checks, and they made shows. I was on top of everything always, even not knowing I was on top of it. It was really quite extraordinary in retrospect. The chutzpah of this person that was once me. I always thought I knew. I still don't know, but I think I know as much as the next person, so I'm very happy to control the product in some way. I've always had that peculiar kind of confidence that I wasn't any worse than anybody else, and maybe I might be better, and that my ideas were not worse than somebody else's. Remember, I'd worked at USIA licking stamps. I'd worked on a lot of things where bosses were revered, but then I'd think, gee, they make mistakes, so I could make mistakes. If they can do it, I can do it too. So I think it came from working for other people so much that I began to think, why not me? What's the big deal here? I deserve a shot.